18 years with a focus on family planning, maternal and child health, and reproductive health as well. She has dedicated her life to making a positive impact in people's lives, collaborating with important global and regional partners such as WHO, Africa CDC, and UNICEF, rather, to promote primary healthcare and universal health coverage. She is particularly, and mentions that she's particularly proud of her work in sub-Saharan Africa, where she has designed, led, and institutionalized programs focused on delivering quality primary healthcare. Among some of the achievements that she would like to mention is that she has several awards, such as the Leadership Award that she received, including the 2017 Women Champion Award, the 2016 American Express Engine Award, and the 2015 Urban Farmer Award, an award I would also like to receive. So please take me under your training, and so, Prof, perhaps you can say hi, just a quick wave to those joining us today. There we go. She threw a how are you within the mute, so I hope you had it. Then we have Ruth Jambi Kimani, who is a seasoned grant making and resource mobilization expert. She is currently setting up a hotspot program for East Africa to address modern slavery for the Freedom Fund organization. She has previously managed and administered grants at HIVOS, including an 86 million, I confused the signs, I think this is euro, it could be pound, but for sure it is 86 million. In terms of voice program that was funded by the Dutch Ministry of Foreign Affairs to support marginalized groups in 6 countries in Africa towards more responsive and inclusive societies. And she's also highly proficient in grant-making structures and systems to enhance accountability and transparency for donor-funded programs. And so, I mean, just with, please, Ruth, salamu. Yeah, so here we have big smiles and a lot of waves. So yeah, so that is the host of those that are joining us today. And as you can tell from just the brief introductions, where I've barely gone into the detail of what their lives look like, especially on a day-to-day basis, that indeed we have a great host of insight and perspective to share for what our topic of the day is, which is social impact financing. And I mean, to say the least, it is a very important conversation for us to have. But before we begin, it is also important to admit that to some, the term social impact financing, if anything, is an addition to the many buzzwords that we find within the space. And so what we thought is very important for us to do as we kick off the session is to have a brief Menti where we can get to engage with you, our audience, and get to just hear what is your understanding around this term that we're throwing in and out around social impact financing. And why is it that we are even having this discussion at such a time as this? Why is it that we've chosen to have these panelists? Why is Moses the host taking our 4:30 to 6 p.m. with this conversation? And so just so that we can be able to access the Mentimeter, I would request that you use either your phone or your laptop or whichever device can easily connect you to the internet. Search on your browser menti.com, okay, menti.com, and then tap in the code 74319256. So we'll give 2 or 3 minutes for us to do that. Because you're on this call, my belief is that you have internet connection. And so now maybe it's just accessing this, right? So again, menti.com, 74319256. Those are the instructions. Let me just quickly also check to see how many of us are joining. Then I will ask my support from Didi to also just share screen on the Menti so that we can see the responses as they come in. So as people join, we'll just quickly switch to that. I see one person is joined in. I think the number is 7431-9256. 7431, it's on the screen, 7431-9256. Okay. Liz, I think you're the one that would take us to the Menti. Or if not, I can perhaps share screen.
So I can't log into the account.
Okay. Okay, let's see. Perhaps you can make me host and then I can share because I can see some responses already coming in. So I can, let me see. No, not yet. But just for some of the responses coming in, the first question was, what comes to mind when you hear the term social impact financing? And some of the responses coming in are investment comes to mind, financial models comes to mind, problem solving, which is the epicenter of why that's the epicenter of social impact, you know. We have social change, addressing social challenges, business for good, return on investment, which is very important. There's also, I see there's a lot on return on investment. I see funding. I see social outcomes. So we have an idea. Again, we use the word cloud. So perhaps a complete and comprehensive response is not necessarily being shared, but we can go on to the next question. We can go on to the next question, which is around how best would you describe your work or practice? So as we share what comes to mind when we think about social impact financing, then the next question would be to try and understand this from the perspective of the work that you do. So how best would you sort of describe your work or your practice? Also so that we can get a little bit of insight of who is joining us in the session today. So for the one that is controlling the Menti, let me see. I don't know if we've been able to see the second question. Maybe we can share on chat if that's possible. Are we all able to go to the next question? Maybe I can ask the DD team. Okay. But anyway, I think we can use the responses that we have so far to sort of have a basis. Maybe what we can do is for the next question, which is, I think, equally important for this session is, maybe you can share on chat. What is one key insight that you hope to glean from this session today? So by the end of this session, what is one key insight you hope to learn? You know, what is that expectation that you have from the session and from the discussions that we're going to have? So you can maybe share this on chat. Yeah, I think we can have the responses coming in on chat. Because I'm seeing the Menti is giving a bit of problem. Oh, okay, good. I think I can share screen. So let me do that. Let me do that really quick. Here we go. There we go. Thank you, team, for giving me this. Oops, this is blocking my way. I need this gone. Share. Oops. Okay, no, not how I wanted it. I want to present. There we go. Are we able to go to the next question? Can we see? I hope we can see the screen. There we go. So for those that are on the Menti, you could go ahead and respond to this question, and we'll be able to see the answers coming in live. Let me see. Good. There we go. Oh, nice. Okay. So we have a few investees or grantees joining us today. We have a few practitioners. So it will be very interesting to hear some of your comments and some of your insights through the chat as we share today. Oh, we have quite a number of practitioners here joined us today. Wow, that's amazing. That's amazing. So we invite you definitely to share on chat on some of the insights and some of the thoughts that are arising during the course of the conversation today. Maybe I can go on to the next question, which is of great importance. What is one key insight you hope to glean by the end of this session? So what is that one thing that based off of the conversations, based off of the responses coming in, you hope to grow in your knowledge of or to grow in your insight of? So for this one, we ensured it's an open-ended response. So you're not limited to a certain number of words. You can share in your statements and some of your thoughts and some of your reflections against what you hope. This is almost just seeking to understand your expectation for today. So yeah, you can just type in the responses, and it'll be great just to see some of what the expectations are for the people joining us. Right, how grantees can be investment ready. That's great. That's actually really good. Understand from investors' ways of improving social impact from a non-profit perspective. Okay. Reaching out and identifying local social impact investors. That's actually really great because that's how you cut on the impact against the initiatives that are being done within the communities, maximizing on the available investors and grantors, more insights on social impact in financing in the local context. Recently, I gave a presentation around just research. What is the funding? What is happening within funding in the philanthropy space? And one of the comments that came in that was really important and crucial is, while we think of a global perspective, how can we translate that into realities on the ground? And this conversation serves that purpose. That yes, we can go behind our desks and do a whole lot of research around what social impact financing is, but conversations like these bring those insights home. They allow us to contextualize and relate with them in a manner that is translatable within our everyday. And then how to choose the right investor for a startup. That's really good. How to achieve social impact in the profit-making space. Okay, so that's really good because again, when we were sharing around this conversation, we had presented it as open, and so it's good to hear that we have some profit-making individuals that have joined us. So this is good. I think now we can kick off the conversation, having a bit of perspective around what people have as expectations for this conversation. So maybe I can stop sharing screen and now kick off with what we have for today. So I would like to begin with a question raised to Grace, especially considering just some of the responses that have come in, yeah? We've seen a trend around what traditional philanthropy is. And a lot of the conversations that people are having is that the philanthropy space is changing. And because of those changes, now we are terming something as traditional philanthropy. And now we're moving into what people are calling impact first investing. And so maybe we can begin this conversation by having you tell us what do we mean when we talk about traditional philanthropy, and what does that look like in action from your perspective?
Great, thank you so much, Moses, and great to be here, and everyone who has joined in today. Good to see you all. So the word traditional philanthropy now makes me feel very old, because that's some of the things that we do, we've grown up doing, we continue to do. But simply put, traditional philanthropy from some perspective, is just about giving towards charity, giving towards charitable purposes, both in cash and in kind. And so it's, for instance, what people would do. There's been a disaster in Kenya recently. We had the floods. So people contributing towards flood response, so that then the money can be put together to help those in need. What we also saw recently in July, whereby Kenyans came together, for those who are in Kenya, and were contributing towards being able to pay for bail for those protesters who had been arrested. That's what we would call traditional philanthropy. One of the things that probably is not talked a lot about is how employees can give. So payroll giving, whereby you are able to tell your employer, as a collective, we're interested in this particular initiative in the country, or this cause, and we want to contribute towards it. So the employer collects that money through payroll giving, and then some employers will actually match it and then give towards that cause. So traditional philanthropy is about giving towards charitable purposes, doing good, people coming together and giving. So what we would call in the Kenyan context, in Swahili, harambee. That's, what you would see in terms of traditional philanthropy. Yeah.
Thank you so much. And especially picking up from just the term that you've used, harambee. And I think one of the things around harambees is when we're giving from a perspective of harambees, we may sometimes not necessarily tie the outcome to the approach that we're using in terms of harambees. Yes, there's an expectation of some form of return, which has already been alluded to in some of the responses that have come in. But then there's a reason as to why there seems to be a shift now from what we are describing as traditional philanthropy into what we are sort of calling impact first funding models. And maybe I can ask Professor Diana, yeah? As we speak about impact fast funding models, what do you see as the novel principle that is sort of being advertised, that is causing us to take a slight shift from traditional philanthropy and what is being termed, quote unquote, as harambees, into impact fast investing? Maybe you can share an insight or two around that.
That's a great question, Moses. The shift from traditional philanthropy that Grace talked about to innovative approaches like social impact financing and results-based or results-driven models reflect a greater desire for greater accountability, for measuring outcomes, but also for sustainable change. Key examples that I can really bring out is the focus on measurable impact, where it's now outcome-oriented giving. Traditional philanthropy often lacks mechanism for measuring the effectiveness of donations, but now social impact financing models like social impact bonds tie funding directly to outcomes, and that ensures that investments generate real social impact. The second thing is that sustainability and accountability are very core when it comes to innovative financing models, such as leveraging private capital, but also long-term solutions to think about what happens beyond the funding. How can we make it sustainable? The third point I'd like to flag is the risk sharing and innovation when we're thinking about the innovative models that are currently happening. In shared risk, it involves impact financing shifts that ensure that the financial risk from governments and donors to private investors who are only paid if social outcomes are achieved. Overall, it's also very critical for us to think about the greater transparency and efficiency, where currently now it's really focused on data-driven decisions. The emphasis of measurement and evaluation in social impact financing ensures that only effective programs are scaled, reducing wastage of funds on ineffective solutions. And so think about things like performance-based financing, where funds are allocated based on evidence of success, leading to more efficient use of resources compared to traditional grants that may continue regardless of impact. The shift reflects a broader trend towards integrating business principles with social good, emphasizing that impactful change is most effective when driven by clear goals, shared responsibility, measurable results, and sustainable efforts towards making sure that things can continue even beyond the funding.
I love this. I just love the response that you've shared. It's so amazing. So yes, I think you've shared the novel principles. Again, it's against accountability. It's driving towards sustainable change. It's based on and it's the foundation is around evidence and around data. Building transparency and really speaking into impact. And I like how you've even given examples such as matched funding, which has also been mentioned by Grace. And now I would like to invite Bartlett to sort of just share with us. I think we've spoken around what impact first investing looks like from theory and from perspective. I'd like to make this to converge this a bit closer. And Bartlett is joining. Okay, so I don't think Bartlett then has had the question as such. So maybe I can.
Moses, I'm here. Moses, you've not asked the question.
Oh, okay. Sorry. Okay, so no, I just saw it on my screen say Bartlett is joining the meeting. So I said, oh, okay, I guess this is quite a warm welcome if this is the question you're joining into. But yes, we've had Professor Diana share with us quite strongly what the novel principle is. What has that looked like for you in the Refugee Consortium of Kenya, especially as the CEO? What does that look like in action and in practice? And maybe share some of the achievements that you would attribute to this shift. Sorry for adding that small component at the end.
That's okay, Moses. Thank you so much. Thank you, colleagues. Moses, I think what Grace and Prof. Diana has said, I want to give a context. It is not so much different, and I will give an example with the organization that I work at. The Refugee Consortium began way back when there was the 1991 Somalia conflict, the ousting of Mohamed Siad Barre. Then there's also the 1994 Rwandan genocide, which led to the rise of displacement. That was the founding. As at then, for me, the impact in terms of how it has taken the trajectory, it has basically begun with the relief perspective, where people are given based on charity, based on the suffering, just to alleviate that. And then it has happened that over the years, this situation has protracted. During the period, it was so commonly referred to as care and maintenance. So it was relief, but about care and maintenance, providing the basic. But now the reality has dawned. The numbers has increased globally in terms of persons who have been displaced. We are looking at the numbers of the neighboring countries which are still in conflict, and the funding limitation is actually on a downward trend. These are actually necessitated a shift from that humanitarian to bridging it with development. So ideally, it's like also within the humanitarian space is how do we ensure sustainability with the dwindling funds, but at the same time, how do we ensure there is positive social outcomes to the persons that are being supported or the persons who are being served? So it is kind of, okay, it has an angle of humanitarian, but now everyone is actually thinking of how do we ensure sustainability? How do we address the immediate, the midterm, and the long-term needs of the populations? Within RCK, just to give an example that you've asked, the question that you brought after, we received funds, and allow me just to mention a very good donor here is ICARE Foundation. ICARE actually looked into the needs of the constituents who are the forcefully displaced populations. They co-created with us a program that will actually support the forcefully displaced populations to be self-reliant toward sustainability. So the co-creation part of it has been brought on board. It's not just a question of giving us funds, but looking at the needs and how we respond to the constituents and how do we ensure they remain self-reliant. So back to you, Moses.
Thank you so much for that, and also giving a bit of the history of the work that the Refugee Consortium of Kenya has sort of been doing. And just using the last example that you've provided as a segue, you've talked about the identification of needs and using co-creation as one of the approaches towards that. And I think one of the things that happens around co-creation is you begin to be exposed to a systems thinking perspective, because now you're inviting those where impact matters into the table of decision making, which presents so many other nuances to how we think about the problem, but then also how we define our impact and how we prioritize what we need to tell in our impact stories. And so I would like to use that segue to invite Ruth to sort of just share with us, given the rise of systems practice and having this holistic perspective, how Bartlett has talked about using co-creation as an avenue to sort of embrace and adopt a systems thinking approach. What has that looked like in terms of, defining the impact areas of the work that you do? What does that look like from your perspective in the work and practice that you engage in?
Okay. Thank you so much, Moses, and thank you for that particular question and also for the submissions that have come through from the previous speakers, which actually build on to, each other. So it's more or less like it's already giving a clear path. Just clarification in terms of providing a background of who Freedom Fund is, because I will be giving examples based on our experience. As a fund, it's a collaborative fund and dedicated solely in creating a society where slavery does not thrive. So our granting and funding doesn't fall under social impact investment per se, because we do not involve or have any expectations of financial returns to ourselves or our back donors. So our investment is squarely, on interventions that place particularly individuals or survivors of modern slavery and human trafficking on a clear path to freedom. And so in terms of identifying impact areas and in line with what Bale was speaking about, we firstly root ourselves in understanding the context in which we work in. So it is very important for us to have that understanding because we would want to concentrate our efforts where slavery issues are prevalent because that is within our sector. So understanding that context, so broader system. So in terms of mapping who is within there, who's working there, who are the key stakeholders, what are the power dynamics, what are these interrelated factors, so that at least we clearly understand the root causes. So when you're coming to invest, we are not just investing to address symptoms, but you're actually thinking about the root causes of, why these particular issues are prevalent or are prevailing. There's also an important aspect that Bale has talked about, particularly on, the wearer of the shoe is the one, that, I don't know how it goes, pinches most. The area of the shoe knows where it pains. Yes, so in terms of engaging the rights holders, because I believe that those directly affected by the issues should be at the center, in defining those impact goals. So it is important, to have the intention of actually being intentional in making those processes participatory, engaging the rights holders or the impacted communities. Then again, also when you look at these social issues, they are complex in nature. And so, not one organization can be able to address or solve these particular issues. And so just looking at understanding the complexity of the issues and identifying leveraging points, at what point would be your tipping point? so that we actually know what your entry point would be when thinking of these different interventions that can create a ripple effect, and also engage in different players instead of duplicating efforts, that, we have different players, collaboratively, or what the word that Bale was using in terms of co-designing and co-creating interventions, so that you're able to address this complex issue. And I think also something, just borrowing from what Professor Diana was mentioning about setting clear goals and measurable. I think it's also important that, you find sometimes you might be ambitious, but I think it is important to actually be realistic when setting this goal. So looking at short-term and long-term, and even in building a culture of learning, and how to sort of, make adaptation as you move on. And also engaging with communities that are, benefiting from these interventions to actually also provide this. So a feedback mechanism that actually just gives these, lessons to be able to continue adapt and be responsive in that regard. So I'll give those as ways that I know we use in terms of identifying our impact areas, and those that can be applied across board. Yeah.
Right. Thank you so much for that response. And I think in what you've shared, so this first part of what we've been talking about has really culminated in understanding how investors or grant makers or financiers or resource holders work towards defining their impact goals. And I think that has been really great. But that, and I think in your response, you've also allowed us to segue just a bit into our next section, where we're talking about how then do organizations and grantees prepare themselves to secure and manage the resources that they sort of receive. And in terms of receiving those resources, I think I'd like to invite you, Grace, just as a starting point to understanding this whole idea of how we secure resources. There was mention around various avenues that are used. What are the instruments and the channels that KCDF has most commonly used to distribute resources towards grantees in your own experience?
Thank you. Thank you for that. So for those who may not know us, we're a community development foundation based here in Kenya, Kenyan owned, Kenyan led, and really focusing on community development. So at the heart of everything for us is our communities at the center of it. Are they in charge of their own development? In June, we launched our Young Environmentalist Innovation Challenge. This was the second year running. And so we were looking for young environmentalists aged from 15 and above who are who are already working in the space of environment and combining tech with it. How can we solve environmental challenges through technology? So that's going to be a competitive process. Persons have applied, groups have also applied, and then we go through a different and they would have identified a program or project they want to support. there are probably those who want to rehabilitate a community school, and they're working with a local community. They're a community organization. And so within that, there are parents who will say, I can contribute towards the structure in terms of timber, so on and so forth. So the organization would assess how much is that timber worth in the market and collate that. Maybe they will have a dinner to raise money, and they will be able to tell us, okay, we have raised 1 million Kenya shillings, and us as KCDF would match that with another 1 million. So the project, let's say, for instance, if the rehabilitation was 2.5, they already have 2 million to undertake that. The other way that we support partners and resource partners is through grants, which it's partners we reach out to because we have seen the impact of their work, and we have seen that it aligns with our values and what we want to do. And so then we would co-create a proposal, whether it's looking for funding together, we would do that jointly, fundraise for that, and then be able to have the grant mechanism around that. So that just gives you a snapshot of the different ways in which we resource partners. And, partners here being used loosely in terms of individuals to organizations, to even those working at the regional level. They're partners that we support that are working at the regional level. Yeah.
Right. Thank you so much for that. I think one of the primary insights that's sort of coming from that is there's this assumption that we can have that money is the end all in all in terms of the support that we can receive as grantees from organizations that we're seeking to work with. And when we think about partnerships, it seems more often than not that they are tied to resource from the perspective of money. But I think your response is sharing that money is a tool in a mixed bag of many others that can be used, and it's also a tool that is allowing some form of de-risking. But then we still find more often than not that grantees still, and even for organizations that provide resources, they also to a degree are grantees from a certain perspective, because we do hold resource in order to disseminate resource. And so this situation still applies, where as CEOs or as executive directors, we are kept awake at night. So I think one of the things that I had being shared recently was that there's a sense to which money can be given, quote unquote, freely, wherein you have like say for instance, KCDF receiving funds freely from whichever donor or philanthropist, but then ensuring that you have these screening measures and structures before then they are disseminated against the communities, right? And so the question that arises is, for the sake of sustainability, and maybe I can ask this to you, Professor Diana, because you've mentioned that you will be leaving shortly. So maybe as your parting shot and as your sort of goodbye, yeah? What does sustainability look like from your perspective, especially in the possibility that funding is going to die? How is it that you, for instance, are aware that there's still light at the end of the tunnel, in as much as Bartlett mentioned, there's condensed resources to sort of support some of the work you're doing? What does that look like from your end? Or what has working towards providing a safety measure? Because that's a risk. So what is the mitigation against that in your perspective?
Thank you, Moses, for that great question, and apologies, I have another commitment at half the hour, but just building on to what Ruth and Grace and colleagues on the call have mentioned, for sure, sustainability is indeed a significant concern for many of us leaders, especially when it comes to ensuring long-term viability if funding becomes scarce. And at TIP Global Health, as we continue to deliver quality primary care, we know that sustainability of this work is very critical because it's about that mother and that child at the last mile. And what we've done is to develop a scalable primary care model that focuses on creating processes and systems that can be scaled and adapted to different contexts. Our primary care model started off in Rwanda in 4 districts. We're scaling it with the government to 10 additional districts with the National Child Development Agency. We're scaling this work to Burundi with Village Health Works and the government of Burundi, but also scaling it to Somalia with Banadir Primary Care Consortium. Clearly, building strong partnerships, collaborating with organizations and businesses and government entities can help share resources, knowledge, and networks. And so a key tenet is strong partnerships can help open doors to new funding opportunities, but also shared initiatives that can cut down on the running costs in delivering primary care. The second is diversifying funding sources. For sure, relying on a single source of funding can be very risky. And so it's very critical for us as leaders in organizations to think about how do we mix funding options to include either grants, donations, or earned income, or partnerships, or even social enterprise models. The third is thinking about emphasizing efficiency, streamlining our processes to reduce costs and increase efficiency. And as we're continuing to do this work, leveraging impact metrics is very critical, demonstrating the impact of our work through data and case studies. An example in point is when we say that to deliver primary care with $1, you can be able to do so much and so much. That is a good example of thinking about leveraging impact matrices in telling your story. And I loved points around colleagues talking about engaging communities. Building those strong relationships with the community can provide a support network to generate grassroots support and to ensure sustainability. Lastly, being innovative continuously, staying ahead of the curve, by continually exploring new ideas and approaches, because innovation can lead to new revenue streams, more efficient processes, and greater impact. And so it's very critical for organizations to really think about enhancing the sustainability and resilience, even in the face of funding challenges.
Right.
Thank you, and over to you, Moses.
Right, and right at the nick of time, right, with such gems. Thank you so much. I am very grateful, and I think the host of us that are here joining the conversation are equally grateful for the gems that have been shared. And you definitely may live in peace, having left us with many pieces, of course. I would like to take this opportunity.
Thank you so much, Moses, for having us. We were so thrilled at Global Health to join this conversation and looking forward to many.
Right, awesome. Thank you so much. We are equally honored. We are equally honored. I'd like to take this opportunity to invite Kelvin. So we've been having a conversation around defining what impact looks like, especially from a funder perspective and from a grantor perspective, and also sharing quite a bit of insight from what the grantees also look like. I'd like to invite Kelvin because as a consultant within the think tank and do tank that is Development Dynamics, you have had the opportunity to engage with various projects that have worked towards supporting grantees, especially around what Prof has mentioned in terms of emphasizing on efficiency. And I wonder then, what has that process looked like in your experience, in terms of what are some of the hurdles that you see grantees facing that is sort of creating a gap in terms of their proper utilization of the resources that they receive in order to push the needle forward in their work? So again, so it's identifying the hurdles, and then what are the opportunities then that these grantees can take to ensure that they're able to secure and to manage these resources, maybe just complementing on some of the points that have been shared in this conversation thus far.
Thank you, Moses. Maybe I'll start with a quick conversation I had with someone with whom we had attended a summit with, who shared that grant making and fundraising is quickly seen in a lens of trying both the funders and the grantees trying to see who they would want to dance with. It's more a dancing, see both in the lens of dancers, and both are trying to see whom they can dance with. So in that lens, some of the hurdles, or rather some of the issues that both have faced, is lack of awareness. From the lens of the grantees, is limited knowledge of funding opportunities, because at times it's not put out there on to everyone. At times it's shared with some individuals, and some organizations may not be aware of the full range of available funding resources, both locally and international. And at times there is unclear eligibility criteria for the same. Secondly, is in regards to ineligibility criteria, whereby some resources and some funders want to work with organizations that have achieved, rather have achieved a lot in the space, the size, at times the geographic location, and at times there is the idea of the focus area, whereby funders want to fund organizations or other grantees from specific regions and geographical locations. The other one is in regards to insufficient capacity, whereby there is limited financial management skills, whereby some organizations may lack expertise to manage and utilize the resources that are shared. And secondly, is in regards to regarding the capacities, weak governance structures, whereby then the organizations don't have a good and stable governance, which then the funders see as a risk. That then if we give you the funds, then you might be able to win, you might not be able to be in a position to manage the funds well. And then insufficient capacity and staff resources, whereby then the funders don't trust organizations that don't have the enough capacity to handle the money well. So to address these challenges, one of the things that I work with and support in regards to that is supporting organizations, and that is the grantees and the funders, to conduct thorough research on what funding is out there for them to apply, that aligns with their mission and vision, and that aligns with what they do and the direction that they have to take. Same case to the funders, conducting thorough research to conduct due diligence to these organizations and see if at all they align with what they want to fund, and supporting on the same. Secondly, is developing compelling proposals, supporting organizations and funders in the same, whereby then we pose and say that if you give us this funding, then we'll support you in ensuring that you've got the right grantees to fund, and support you in measuring the impact, as well as ensuring that we support you in ensuring that you get the reports that are needed. Thirdly is supporting organizations and grantees in strengthening their financial management, so that, again, they know that what is needed from the funders and what is their expectation, so that, again, they're in a position to address the same. And lastly is supporting the trustees, the grantees, in seeking the technical assistance, so that they have a strong organization to be able to receive the funding that is there. Thank you, Moses.
Right. Clearly your experience has taught you a lot, because you've shared quite a bit. And I think that, like what you've shared, speaks into three things that I sort of see that are very huge in this conversation. One of the things I have mentioned recently is that this space works based off of trust. But a lot of the observations that we've made in terms of how things are looking on the ground is that there seems to be a component of trust deficit, right? That is causing responses from either side. For instance, as a funder, I will have a screening process. From the perspective of a grantee, where there is a recognition of a trust deficit, there is an expectation of how I show up. And that takes me to the second thing, which is what you've mentioned around impact stories, how I tell my impact story. But aside from how I tell my impact story, it's also how I drive my impact story. So it's what impact am I driving to, but also what is my governance and my operations that then drives towards this impact that is so important. And then this sort of culminates in now what funders would sort of see as priority before disseminating resource in whatever form it takes, which is basically based off of due diligence. And so we see these three things interacting and socializing together. But it sort of now takes us into a pretty important part of this social impact financing conversation, which is impact reporting and storytelling, you know? And so in the impact capital chain, you know, ideally we have investors who would be the resource holders that, you know, are working with and partnering with organizations and enterprises who would then be implementers that are working towards driving change with rights holders. I think I found a good replacement. Thank you, Ruth, for having mentioned it. I have genuinely borrowed it because beneficiary is generally not the term to use in such conversations. Yes, so for rights holders, you know, and something that's very interesting is within this capital chain, we're all driving towards impact, but sometimes we see that we play a different role towards the impact that we're driving to, you know? And maybe from a funder's perspective, I'm curious to know, and I can ask this to you, Grace, how is it that from, you know, you're the CEO of Kenya Community Development Fund. How does KCDF identify the impact that is attributable to their work, if at all that is the priority of the impact report or story that KCDF intends to tell?
So yes, for us as a foundation, being able to show the impact is very important. Not only because we want to be accountable to the communities we work with, but also that want to be accountable for the persons or both individuals and institutions that give us support to be able to carry out this work. So KCDF, as you mentioned, for others as well, not only do we fund, but we also get funded, apart from then our own financial resources that we also give out in terms of funds. So for us, in terms of being able to see where the impact is or what can we attribute to us, we really follow where we have put the investment. Where have we put the investment? But also, what was the return we wanted to see? What is the change we wanted to see, to put it in a different term? And being able to have a very good correlation between we've put in support towards this particular piece of work, whether it's education, environment, livelihoods, community development, and we wanted this particular outcome. So recognizing that there are many other players in the room, being able then to see, yes, we put in this, we expected to get this out of it, and it has now happened. So then we are able to see, yes, we can tick the box. So just an example, one of my colleagues is busy doing documentation of some of our work around supporting persons with epilepsy. And as she was doing that work, she said, yes, I can see the impact of our work because these young people who have received this support, their lives have changed, you know. They have better access to healthcare, they have better access to education, they have better access to being able to etch out a livelihood. So for us then, as much as there were other contributing factors in the environment that have led to success, we can attribute our investment or our support, our grant to that organization, because that is the work they've been doing, and now we're able to see the results. So storytelling is very, very important, because then, especially for individual funders who would want to support different projects, they want to see how would you be able to show where my money has gone and the impact it has had. And that really brings it out. Some would want to see figures in terms of improved livelihood outcomes. So you have to also know your audience. Communities would want to see, okay, you came and you worked with this other organization in our area. What have they done for us? And we have to be able to be accountable to communities and say, from the time we started working with this organization in your locality, we have now seen changes in this and this way. So measurement is important, as had been said by Prof. Dana earlier, being able to track that, and then you're able to tell a powerful story in terms of the impact and the attribution.
Right. Thank you so much for that. And I think one of the aspects that have been mentioned that have come out so strongly is around partnership, for instance, that allows us not only to prioritize really what we intend to work for in terms of the impact goals or the outcomes that we're aiming for, but they also allow us to protect our mandate and ensure that we're not necessarily becoming a jack of all trades, but we're also embracing that we're not dealing with isolated issues, but systemic issues that allow us then to prioritize our contribution with an overall systemic goal in mind. And I think that's a very important insight to share. But still, there is that importance of recognizing that a lot of investors sort of function with a funding cycle, for instance, and it has a starting point and it has not necessarily an ending point, but a shifting point, let me put it that way. And this is something that organizations that are receiving grants need to sort of be aware of. And I wonder then, if I may invite you, Bartlett, to share, what can you share in terms of how enterprises can prepare for when they notice that there's an exit intention by our primary or core supporter of our work? How do organizations recognize and respond to this in your perspective?
Thank you, Moses. Just to mention, for the non-profit, we are stewards. Those resources are not ours. We are just custodians for a certain period in terms of time, in terms of scope, what we are supposed to do, and then quality in terms of what my colleague Grace has mentioned. They want to see the outcome, they want to see the results. Having that in mind, you realize our approach of even retaining and even a message to the investors, diversifying is very critical. And within diversification, you can have twofold approach. One is the acquisition, where you bring in new investors, new donors, and then also the retention part of it. And the retention part of it is what my colleagues like Prof. Diana already had mentioned, and also the experiences that Kelvin has had. There are dynamics within this space. Some of the decisions, by the time they come down to us, they've already been decided. So, and I liked the word that Grace used, we are locally led, local leadership. So it really means a lot to us. RCK is locally founded, locally led, and we understand the context. But through the 24 years that we've been in this space, it has made us also to basically not only go into financing, but also the aspect of friend raising. A colleague of ours said about the information sharing. When you are part of that system of sharing information, you build a relationship. It creates a mutual trust and a mutual learning. It's like a sharing approach to what we are doing. This also really helps a lot. Sometimes it's not about the financials, but it's also about how we inculcate how we keep that relationship going. Being stewards, there are times there are funds, there are times there are no funds, but at least you realize there is something that keeps the organization afloat. For the investors, I know there is an aspect related to return on investment. Can you work with the non-profit making organizations to leverage on that? Can you harness the social problems, you turn them into opportunities of investments for the greater good of all the persons involved? So just to mention, because the colleagues have already mentioned, back to you, Moses.
Right. Thank you so much for the contribution given. I see we have only 10 minutes to the close of the call. And so maybe I would ask a final question that I would direct to Ruth that could also serve to a degree as our parting shot before we introduce one last mentee, just to close the loop on the conversation we're having that invites our guests to sort of just share what they've been learning through the conversation we're having. And this question is around just the reality that we face on the ground, that sometimes where we recognize that there is a funding gap and that there is also increasing needs combined with a funding gap, there tends to be a prevalence of this term that is called impact washing. And impact washing is basically where we overemphasize the impact and the outcomes of our work in a means to secure resources. And so the stories that we are telling are amplified, or they are, what's this word that is used? We create hyperbole to the stories that we tell. And I wonder, how is it that what advice would you give to organizations? Because the work that we do is very sensitive, you know? How is it that we can protect ourselves from that pressure as organizations that are receiving grants and pushing the needle forward with the significant work that we do from impact washing behaviors, to put it that way?
Okay. Thank you so much, Moses. And I think I'll borrow quite a lot from, again, what Bale and Kevin and Grace mentioned. And Kevin at some point, because I also wanted to just interject a little bit there, just following on, and this I'll be speaking of the benefit that I have been in both sides, as a person who is seeking funds, and now as a person who has a privilege in terms of managing grants and pushing money to organizations. There was a forum, and I don't know whether it's the same forum that Kevin, you were in, where we were engaging some group of grassroots organizations, women-led, young women-led organizations. And so it was a funders versus women-led organizations, and they were just giving feedback in terms of processes and how tiresome our processes are that make it so difficult. And there was one statement that stuck into my head when one of the ladies in the group actually indicated that you actually make us feel or have shame when coming to seek funding from you. And yet these are things, projects or initiatives that, they have put everything, sweat, blood, and everything to have it start off. And I remember also during a HRFN meeting, I did a presentation of when we are going to engage organizations and indicate through this, script that we have showing that you are a high-risk organization. The question always is, whose risk is it? Is it your risk? That organization getting funding from you is a risk, or you funding that organization? So actually redefining this aspect of risk. And so for me, when I think about the relationship between funders and grantees, I would like to disrupt it a little bit and even begin to sort of find ways of how that shifts. So that there's more power to organizations while engaging or speaking about their different initiatives. And this comes to this question that you're asking, about and what you see most often in terms of this over-magnification of positive outcomes. And I believe if you have had a relationship with the grantee partners at the level whereby you have managed the trust between yourself and them, then I believe that even conversations around what is not possible is easy. Vis-a-vis when later only, because you have this scheme of things that is a checkbox, then that always happens because they would also want to keep, to show that they are actually doing the work. Again, I remember in my previous organization, there's a component that I loved populating with our organizational annual report, and we used to call it a brilliant failure. And just thinking about practices that organizations can or need to adopt so as to promote that transparency, authenticity, and accountability is to be able to freely and openly talk about failures. Or talk about challenges in a way that, in a transparent way, and showing that vulnerability that you're not able to achieve, the so-called big outcomes that you'd have laid down. And I believe by having this kind of conversation from the word go, and even as organizations are implementing the initiatives, it will be more seen as, that the organization is showing, or demonstrating opportunities for, improved learning, or improvement, as in they're willing, they're open to learn and improve in their ways of working. So that is one of the things that I feel that is with the relationship in the first go, and also in terms of the interaction that you're having when it comes to reporting and how you communicate when it comes to any successes or failures of the initiative, and being open to that. Again, there are other practices that, could also be useful, particularly in encouraging mutual accountability. I think is something that, Grace, you're mentioning, and providing spaces where also partners are able to learn from each other and hold each other accountable when it comes to claiming particular outcomes or things that are actually, truly validated as attributable to the work of that organization. And also other efforts in terms of aligning claims with evidence. And you could use tools like outcome harvesting. I know for M&E experts, that I find that particular process very useful in a way that you are able to, even as you say, this is the outcome that you have achieved after 3 years, you can actually, go back towards it to substantiate, to ensure that actually you can be able to claim that kind of, outcome. So I believe these are some of the things that I had in mind in terms of how organizations can shield themselves. And I'm happy to engage, particularly in terms of how to shift these conversations from funders or grant makers, defining what needs to be seen vis-a-vis organizations being proud with what they actually have as investment-worthy initiatives.
Right. And I think that's definitely a powerful way to sort of close the loop in the conversation that we're having, where it's not necessarily a matter of shape yourself in a certain way in order for you to find favor with either, with like a grant maker, for instance. It's more so about staying true to the mandates that you have, but then also being intentional about the journey that you're going through in the work that you're doing, which means adopting a culture of learning and of Kaizen, which is just basically improvement at every stage of your journey. I would like to take this opportunity, because we are in closing, to also seek to engage the guests that are with us, maybe through a quick Menti that seeks to find out what is that one key takeaway that you feel has resonated strongly with you in the conversation that we've had. So we're going back to the same link that we had and to the same access code. just share a thought that perhaps for you has really come out very strongly. Let me just share screen very quickly so that we can be in a position to see this. Here we go. There we go. So yeah, the question is, what is that one key takeaway that you would share from the session that we've had today? The many conversations that we've held, the code is still the same, 7, you can see it at the top of the screen, the instructions to join. So it's join@menti.com. And the code presented is 74319256. It would be great for us to just hear what is that one key takeaway as we are defining our impact goals, as we are, both as a grant maker that is receiving grants that you disseminate, and also as a grantee, that is receiving grants for the work that you do with the various rights holders that form the basis of why you exist. And also talking about how you secure and you manage your resources. And then lastly, about impact reporting and storytelling. What is that one key takeaway from the many nuances and things spoken of today that you feel you're taking from the session? So we may extend just a bit in terms of time, but it's because we prioritize what is that lesson that is being learned. Shifting the risk from grantees to grant makers. That's one key takeaway that is being derived from this conversation. Maybe we can share a few more just to have a small look at this before we introduce what our next conversation will look like. So we encourage you to share some of the thoughts that are arising, just to make sure that there's meaning, to this 1.5 hours that we have submitted ourselves for. So adaptive learning and outcome harvesting, which has just been mentioned by Ruth. Any more thoughts that we could have? I'm sure we are busy typing, but I can see this is some of the reflections coming in. Impact washing has come as something big. And I would like to even link impact washing to shifting the risk from grantees to grant makers, because it seems that impact washing is a sort of response to a pressure that you may be feeling, deconstructing power dynamics, revisiting why organizations exist, both as grantees and as grant makers. So it's not about financials, it's about the social course or joint goal for social good. We are the custodians and stewards of these grants as restated by Jaji, who also is Halet. So for those, it's Harley, it's okay. It's past my memory. Yes, it's Halet Koli Jaji. Yeah. So thank you so much for these responses. I think that we have a call to action. I can see that. And one of the primary things that was coming out is partnership, where we can broaden our perspective in terms of how we achieve our work, that our work is also centered on data and on evidence for it to really make sense in the grand scheme of things, and then also that we are accountable to our rights holders for the work that we do, So thank you so much for the responses that have come in. We're very grateful. Collaboration across all sectors. We're taking a system and holistic perspective. We're no longer seeking isolated solutions. We're seeking interconnected solutions that draw from the nuances of social problems that we face. Thank you so much for your reflections and for sharing within this session. Maybe just a quick, if the team can go back to sharing the slides so that we can show what we are having as our conversation for this coming September. Actually, before we do that, you can stay on this slide. You can stay on this slide. Choosing your next, right? The evolving philosophy, almost just bringing this conversation down. Innovate, specialize, scale, and increase your impact. And what this looks like is risk. Innovation is tied to risk, which also is tied to cost. So there is a cost to the transition and to the shift that we're taking as organizations and as change makers in the work that we're doing. Co-creation, right? Co-creation at a systems level that calls for collaboration and sharing impact as well, and innovation and diversifying and scaling, and also keeping our costs down. One of the things about collaboration is we no longer find ourselves wasting the resources that we have. And so the new philosophy that we are adopting then is one that emphasizes on intentionality, one that emphasizes on the use of evidence and impact data, one that calls us to be accountable and to be disciplined, which means managing our impact performance. And lastly, working with the sense that we are contributing in our own degree, in our own scope, in our own effort to sustainable futures. That is why we are here. That is our call to action. And that's the philosophy that causes us to continue to iterate and to grow and to drive solutions to our communities and to our homes. So maybe to the next slide as we close. We are having a conversation that is around, we as Development Dynamics host what is called the Didi with Maxi, which is basically conversations around the impact stories told by our organizational leaders and social impact leaders that are often untold. And it's just basically around the lives, the times, and the chapters of people that are making good happen within Africa. And so we are launching our Luminaries booklet, which will feature influential stories and insights from leaders that have been featured within our Didi with Maxi podcast. And they're just highlighting the importance of their personal narratives in shaping the perceptions and in shaping the future of what impact looks like, today and tomorrow in their respective fields of development. And this is ranging from healthcare, governance, and much more. And so this is an exciting event that we're having, which is going to be hosted by our very own Gloria Omuya, who is an affiliate with Development Dynamics, but has been part and parcel and very married to this process. And also Maria Angela, our ballet dancer, but then also our policy specialist within Development Dynamics, who have worked tooth and nail towards development of this booklet, and also working towards the launch that is set to take place on the 26th of September 2024. So this is a really exciting one that we're very happy and very expectant for in this coming month. And so also now to the very last slide, we would, in closing, so we will not take more than 5 minutes now, for sure. If you would please go to the last slide. I believe there is a last slide. Yes, you can, based off of the conversations that we've had today, again, as Development Dynamics, we are practitioners that serve, whether you're a grantee or whether you are the resource holder that is disseminating grants, to support the various investment portfolios and strategy that is applied within the work that you do, as your thought partner, being that we are a think tank, but also as a do tank that says this is what implementation will look like based off of the insights and based off of the perspectives that we have gathered. We would be happy to journey with you in what sustainable futures looks like from the work that you're currently doing, and connecting with other significant pieces that will push the needle significantly forward in the work that you're doing. So you can scan on the page shared below with the code that has been shared, and you will find calendar slots that you can book some time with us and develop based off of the conversations that we've had. How do we materialize that in the work that we're doing, based off of this conversation around social impact financing? What are the open doors of opportunity that we can easily take? What are the closed doors that may seem a bit difficult, but we still have some changing and some shifting that allows us an access point and an entry point towards achieving the same? And also highlighting what are some of the brick walls that will be hard for us to sort of penetrate through, that we need to identify, so that we're not in a position where we're wasting resources on avenues that are not for today. there are avenues that we can take, but they're for the hereafter. They're not for the right now. And so, you can book a time with us and we would be happy to engage. We only had 1.5 hours for this conversation, but we look forward to building a relationship and building a knowledge base and also supporting you in telling and in defining your impact story. So thank you very much for those of you that have joined us today. We are very grateful and we are very honored also to our panelists that have taken the time out to share your experiences and to contribute to this conversation and be a part of this platform that we started in hope, but in great belief that it still serves as a contribution to the sustainable futures that we exist for. So thank you so much. I have been your host, Moses Mwai. And as your impact management and measurement specialist, I will be happy to continue this conversation with you. So I think that is about it. I would like to close with my own waves. So we had the panelists waving. I think it's my turn to wave and to say goodbye. Have yourselves a lovely evening and may God bless you. Right. Thank you.